Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest headlines in the sport as we start to ramp up the schedule here in 2022. We've got MMA Junkie Radio's Goes Garcia with us, as well as Nolan King and Mike Bond. So let's just jump into it, guys. As we look to the first UFC pay-per-view of the year, it seems like the biggest storyline right now is Francis Ngannou's contract status rather than the unification of the UFC heavyweight title. So what do you make of this very public battle between the fighter and the promotion? And do you think it'll have an effect on what we actually see in the cage at UFC 270? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Goes. Get us going.
Man, these things can get ugly pretty fast. So I can count on one hand probably the amount of fighters that have gotten the best of the UFC when it comes to contract negotiations. It really isn't that many of them. So really what you have to do, what it comes down to, is you do have to perform in that cage. Now, just because of that doesn't mean fighters need to stay quiet. They just have to pick and choose their moments, right? So in this world, for as long as I've been around, the heavyweight champion has been the man. Whether it was boxing or now mixed martial arts, it was always the heavyweight champion. And I think that's an ace up Francis Ngannou's sleeve, right? We saw how much it bothered Dana White when people referred to Fedor Emelianenko as the GOAT over at Pride. It seemed to bother him for a while. So I think that's something he needs to focus on. Just go out there and perform. Get the job done. I think the guy really matured a lot from that Stipe, that loss with him, Stipe Miocic. I saw a lot of maturity out of Francis. I don't think things like that are going to bother him in the cage. So really, when you think about it, a lot of this beef has been with his management and with Dana White. And who knows, man? I mean, things can get pretty ugly. We saw Kevin Lee. He's represented by the same guy. He got let go. I don't know if that's a shot. But really, I think Francis Ngannou has proven to us that he's matured, and he's the guy that's going to keep everything together in that cage.
Yeah, that's the interesting part, right? You got to speak up as a fighter to maybe use that public sentiment to help your case out a little bit, right? But I always wonder, is that proving a distraction as well, you know? So I don't know what to make of it. Nolan, what do you make of the whole situation?
Yeah, it's complicated. I could probably go on and on for a while, but I'll answer your second question first, which is I don't think that this will necessarily have a big impact on Francis. I think, like Ghost said, he's kind of at that point in his career where I think maybe those mental errors, the hiccups, the freezing in the cage, those sort of things that he seemed to used to be bothered by the couple times that he was in big spots. I don't think, I think he's proven the last couple fights that that's not really the case anymore. As for, these negotiations being public, like Ghost said, it's really tough for one fighter, no matter how big you are, with the exception of maybe Conor McGregor. The UFC's kind of proven that they're bigger than just one fighter. So I respect Markel Martin. I see what he's coming out and saying. He might have legitimate cases there with some of the stuff he says, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, the UFC is just so powerful as it is, where if any fighter just steps up on their own or their management, I think the only thing that's really going to do is anger the UFC. And honestly, the fighter ends up paying for that in the long run, whether it be in negotiations or opportunities or whatever. So hopefully cooler heads can prevail. I know Dana said he ran into Francis recently and things were a little bit better, at least between them two. Hopefully we can see Francis stay in the UFC, because I don't really see a lot of options out there in terms of heavyweights, big fights elsewhere.
It's interesting just how much this has become part of the storyline, right? It's like we're not even talking about the unification, the heavyweight title. It should be like we're living all that. I guess the part that scares me the most is that, right, he becomes a free agent if he loses. I'm not saying the guy throws a fight, but do you go in there thinking, if I lose, what is that? What do you make of it, Mike?
It's definitely interesting. I mean, like we talk about, is this going to impact the fight? It's going to be really hard to say one way or another, because Ciryl Gane is pretty damn good. And no matter whether this was going on or not, he might be as skilled as it needs to be to beat Francis Ngannou on his best night. So that's something that's going to be interesting to see how that factors into the performance. But as far as, the whole contract situation, everything like that, there's a lot weighing on this fight. I mean, Francis Ngannou is talking about how he wants to box Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury and all this stuff outside the UFC one day. If he loses badly, I don't really think, even though that may make him a free agent, I don't think that enhances the appeal of those fights. So like, he needs to win this fight. And then I think his contract gets extended one more. And if he wins that fight, then he could potentially be your UFC heavyweight champion, who is also a free agent. And if they give him John Jones after this or something like that, I mean, can you just imagine where Francis Ngannou would sit as far as the star power? So this whole thing is fascinating. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens, unfolds in a few weeks here. And one of the big storylines in 2022.
Yeah, listen, no question. Francis Ngannou deserves to get paid, right? I mean, the guy is a superstar, but I just hope this doesn't impact the fight at all, man, because I am loving that fight on paper, and I don't want there to be any distractions whatsoever for what should be an incredibly intriguing main event. Well, guys, speaking of public battles, how about Jake Paul versus Dana White? That seems to be the matchup that's on everybody's mind right now, at least if the MMA Junkie numbers are any indication of public interest. So what do you make of this continued battle here? I mean, is Jake Paul really just trying to be an advocate for fighters, or is there something else going on here? And is Dana making a mistake by engaging him, right? This might be a losing battle for him. So what do we make of this? What is happening here? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, get us started.
I think just taking the journalist hat off here for a second and put on the fan hat. This might be one of the first times that I've actually been like truly entertained by the Jake Paul shenanigans. I think his back and forth with Dana, both of them, I think had their moments, but I'm not sure if Dana wants to step into the world of creating, social media videos and going toe to toe with Jake Paul in that regard, just because of obviously that's what Jake Paul did before he was a boxer. So I think that it's been entertaining. I think it's interesting, regardless of Jake Paul's intent, which I'm sure is probably dollar signs in terms of a big offer down the line, whether it be in a boxing match against a UFC fighter or somehow if he ends up, being the next CM Punk and kind of being the celebrity that joined the UFC. I'm sure that it's motivated by money, but at the same time, he is saying stuff that I think he knows will annoy the UFC. It's big topics, obviously, that not a lot of fighters will bring up. I thought it was something that was interesting when he said, everybody needs you, Dana, but I don't. So he does have kind of that sort of thing going for him, and he's big enough, popular enough, where Dana White does feel the need to respond. I mean, we've heard in the past all sorts of people say things about Dana White, the UFC, about fighter pay, whatever. How many times can you remember over a holiday that Dana drops like a 2-minute video just going off on somebody like that? It's been a while. It's been a while since Dana's been that insulting on Twitter and social media and whatnot. So clearly it strikes some sort of a chord. I don't know if they'll end up getting Jake Paul any sort of opportunity with the UFC down the line. I still think that that's pretty far-fetched, but crazier things have happened. We've seen Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather. We've seen CM Punk in the UFC. We've seen Brock Lesnar bouncing around. So who knows? I'm just here to kind of watch the show, and it has been actually entertaining for once.
It has been entertaining. I just wonder how long Jake Paul sticks with it, right? I mean, if this deadline passes, does he continue to battle for fighter pay? Does he help with a union? I mean, what happens there? Mike, what do you make of this whole back and forth?
Yeah, as far as kind of those points there, I mean, I think Jake Paul, if it was a side consequence of him saying all these things and doing all this stuff, UFC fighters getting extra benefits or banding together or increased pay, I mean, I'm sure he would love that because then he could hang his hat on it. But obviously, I think down to its core, this is all selfish. This is all to boost his brand, whether that's getting casual fans or UFC fans that may not love Dana White as much kind of on his side to a degree. And then he could say all these things, that other fighters, as Nolan kind of hit the nail on the head there, can't really say in that public forum. It's all working towards getting interest in his own fights when that happens. And if he fights in the UFC one day, if something like that happens, I mean, it's all trending towards that. But he's saying the right things. I mean, I think as we kind of talked about on our year-end show last week, I think Jake Paul's really done a master job of kind of manipulating his situations and playing his cards perfectly. I think he did that again here. I would not, if you're Dana White, be getting into a troll war with Jake Paul. You're not going to win that one, but it's good content. I mean, it's something for us to talk about when there's no UFC fights going on for these next few weeks, and I'm here for it. I'm interested to see where this kind of evolves to going into the next year.
It's pretty interesting. I think everybody believes don't get into a content battle. Like you're going to lose that, right? No matter how much you got going on here. Jake Paul is going to be better than you at that. Goes, what do you think? Should Dana just back out and quit saying the name?
Dana needs to start playing chess, not checkers. This is not his game, Jake Paul, he's an agent of chaos. He's getting everything that he wants. He wants to draw attention to himself to build up his fights. And along the way, he's saying some good things that might benefit fighters. But at the end of the day, if fighters want change, it's got to come from them. It's got to come within them. So Dana's got to know his role. He's got to back off and be a promoter of the biggest mixed martial arts organization in the world. When he gets asked that question, he's probably going to get asked that question. Quick answers, in and out. But don't do these videos and all that. This is Jake Paul's world. You don't want to mess with that. That kid he doesn't even have to make sense. It just has to be funny. And he's going to win 10-8 rounds over and over. So Dana, just do your thing, man.
Oh, man. Dana's never going to admit defeat, is he? I think it's sound advice. But like I said, I hope that Jake Paul, if he really does mean this stuff, that he continues to push for it. After his career's done or whatever fight happens, if he's really meaningful in this, sign up with a union, help support it, get something going if it's important to you. So we'll see how it all plays out. Because if we're looking at fights that might actually happen in 2022, Tony Ferguson has a matchup with Michael Chandler is in the works. Now, El Kukui fought just once in 2021. He's looking to snap a 3-fight skid right now. Meanwhile, Chandler's also on a 2-fight losing streak, although we're talking about a fight of the year effort, a UFC title fight, so a different kind of streak. So I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, is this a fight that makes sense more for one guy than the other? Is it a fight that makes sense completely? Doesn't make sense at all? Should the UFC be looking for something different? Mike, what do you think about this matchup?
I like it. And first, I want to say, the Tony Ferguson disrespect has got out of hand recently, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, this guy's on a 3-fight losing skid. He hasn't looked amazing. They've been pretty convincing losses, but look who he is fighting, man. I mean, Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush. Those might be the 3 best lightweights in the world right now. So give this guy a little respect. Not many people are going to win those 3 fights in a row. So I don't necessarily mind this. I mean, we got to keep in mind, Tony Ferguson is 37 years old. He, regardless of how you want to frame it, is on the back end of his career, regardless of what I just said there. That lightweight division's insane, man. This guy doesn't have time to build up another 12-fight winning streak or whatever. If he has any ambitions of being a title challenger, being in that mix anymore, Michael Chandler is the perfect way to do it. I mean, you get a guy who's still in the top 5, who has that clout coming off the fight of the year. I think it's a perfectly logical matchup, and if Ferguson wins, he's right back on track. He's in the conversation to get those big fights again. So for him, it makes all the sense in the world, and I think if you're Michael Chandler, obviously you don't want to suffer 3 losses in a row, so I think this is a very winnable fight for him. Tony Ferguson still has name. The potential action in this fight between them is off the hook. So, yeah, I think this is a perfect fight for both guys in a lightweight division where, as we've talked about before, you can just throw, 2 names in a hat and pick them out randomly between the top 10. You're going to get a great fight. That's what you're getting here. So, yeah, I love this fight for both guys. I think it makes a great amount of sense.
Yeah, such a tough spot, right? For Tony Ferguson, I almost feel like a rebuilding fight is almost the move right now, but there are no rebuilding fights. And as you said, time not necessarily on his side. I mean, this is the UFC. You can't slip down. Goes, what do you think? Does this make sense for one guy more than the other?
I think who it makes the most sense for is the UFC, because get ready, people. 2022 is going to be all about rematches. And this is a fresh matchup. Think about it. We got to sit through Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena, Adesanya and Whitaker, Aljo and Yan, Moreno Figueiredo. Even Esparza Nunez is technically, or Namajunas and Esparza is going to be a rematch. So there's going to be a lot of those. Not to mention, we might see Poirier and McGregor again, or Holloway and Volkanovski. They need fresh matchups, and these are fresh guys getting in there. They have a beef. It's the easiest thing you could sell. As Mike said, if you look at their losses, I mean, both of them have lost to Gaethje and Oliveira, the current champ, and the guy that's fighting for the championship. And then you throw in Beneil Dariush in there. He's right. I mean, these guys are still at the top of their game. Tony Ferguson's getting a little older. He probably needs to win a little bit more than Michael Chandler, but this is a fight that's going to deliver. Give them their $50K now. The UFC needs this fight more than anyone.
Man, I tell you what, when I first heard it, I wasn't sure I loved it. I think you guys are selling it to me now. I think I like this fight. No. Is this the fight to make?
Coming into this, I would have said no, that both guys kind of needed a little bit of a rebound, especially Tony. For obvious reasons, like Mike said, he's on the skid and just has been kind of beaten in every round that he's taken, in the last 3 fights. So for me, I think it's definitely a more beneficial fight for Chandler. He's catching a guy that might be, we don't know, right? Like Mike said, these are top contenders that he's losing to. So it's kind of hard to really bury him. But in terms of the possibility that he is declining, Michael Chandler's catching him at a good time. Michael Chandler, even though he had a very impressive first year, he needs a win. He needs to show that he can beat the top 10 in the UFC. Tony Ferguson gives him that opportunity. It gives him another opportunity to win a bonus. But if I'm him, I'm going into this fight. I need to fight smart. I know he threw kind of all caution out the window against Justin Gaethje, which made for my fight of the year and just a phenomenal all-time battle. But I would like to see Michael Chandler be a little bit more measured here, despite the opponent. He should go into this fight and really, look at this as like, hey, I need to prove something to someone that I can get in the win category. I'm not just here to put on exciting fights. And for Tony, obviously needs a win now more than ever. Doesn't have all the time in the world, like Mike said.
I guess that's the one thing that I kind of didn't like about it coming in, right? Is we're guaranteeing that one of these guys is going to extend that losing streak. And I feel like both of them are in such big need of a victory right now. But at the same time, It's two top names. It's two exciting fighters. It's two guys that are going to bring it. So I guess that's just the unfortunate byproduct, right? I mean, one of them's going to keep that streak going, but I think I'm in for it now too. Guys, meanwhile, over at Bellator, Scott Coker has said that if Ryan Bader is victorious at Bellator 273 later this month, Fedor Emelianenko wants that matchup for his retirement fight. What do we think of this idea? I mean, a title fight is a retirement fight at this point. I mean, is this a good idea or is this a terrible idea? Goes, let's put 4 minutes on the clock. You kick it off.
Well, I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it's definitely not something I would be looking forward to. There just aren't that many options. And what does that say about a guy like Fedor Emelianenko when there aren't that many options? It means he's fought a lot of people. He's fought all the who's who in this business. I know Scott Coker's a big admirer of Fedor Emelianenko, and I don't think he would give him a layup to walk out into the sunset. I mean, that's not Coker's style. It's not Fedor's style. Bader is a good fight, and I think people will tune in. But really, the fan in me doesn't want to see a rematch, and I don't want to see the title get bogged down. I mean, what happens if he wins and it goes up for grabs? It sets everything back. It's just not really a good idea. What I am on board with is everything else Scott Coker says, the fireworks, the big stage. Fedor Emelianenko deserves that. So what I would do, what Goes Coker would do, is sit back and think, what are my fondest memories of Fedor Emelianenko? And they all happened in Pride, guys. So what I would do is I would search down a Pride legend. Alistair Overeem, why not bring him in? I mean, guys, if we look back at that Strikeforce Grand Prix, wasn't that something Scott Coker was trying to set up anyway? And a guy by the name of Daniel Cormier and Antonio Silva, they had a different idea of what to do. But why not try and get that guy, bring him in for one fight, send him off into the sunset, an old Pride fight? I think it would be fun, guys. Do that, Scott Coker.
Yeah, see, it's incredible, right? Because at 45 years old, the fact that Fedor still wants these type of challenges says a lot for the type of fighter he is, the type of character that he has. But there are a lot of potential bad endings, either for him or the promotion itself. So that's why I'm a little torn here. Nolan, what's your take on it?
You know, I like it, and I'll say that there's two reasons. One is it's because Fedor's a legend, and this is what he wants. So why not let him go out on his own terms? That's the reason that he picked the Tim Johnson fight. I know a lot of people had problems with it, myself included. I thought the matchup was totally off the wall and didn't make much sense, but the end product turned out to be pretty good. And the reason for that is that Fedor kind of wanted that one more shot at gold. So that's kind of the first leg, you know, of the whole thing. And then the other aspect of it that kind of sticks out to me as well is, like, for Fedor, you're always going to run a risk when you put a 45, 46-year-old heavyweight in the cage that somebody's going to be faster, somebody's going to be quicker, and in the heavyweight division that somebody's going to land that single strike that puts him out. So I think that there's a risk that's going to be inherent no matter who you put Fedor in there against. And for me, would I rather have him fight the champion, the guy that's supposedly the best heavyweight in Bellator, and have him lose, or would I rather have him lose to, you know, somebody on the come up, or somebody, Czech Congo, or somebody that's been around for a while that's not the champion? So for me, I like this match. I like the idea of Fedor getting to do his own thing. I know they have some big stuff planned for Fedor to kind of have that homecoming in Russia, much bigger than the last fight that he had, much different than the last fight he had. So I'm looking forward to it, just because Fedor gets to go out on his own terms.
Yeah, the inherent risk, I think, that's what stands out to me too, right? As maybe an argument for it. Like, you're not going to be able to put a heavyweight in there that can't knock you out. That's what the heavyweight division's all about, right? So, Mike, what do you think? Is this the right move?
Yeah, of course it's the right move. And especially, I mean, this wasn't something that Scott Coker kind of volunteered. I kind of pitched this scenario like, hey, what happens if Ryan Bader wins? The timing could kind of line up here. And he's like, hey, well, kind of interesting. That's literally the exact scenario that Fedor asked me and said he wants to do. So obviously I'm all about that. I think, you know, if Fedor is going to lose his final fight, why not it be for the championship? That kind of goes hand in hand with his legacy, fighting, you know, the best guys. I know he's had some fights against some questionable opponents over the years, but I think in terms of his Bellator run, this would kind of be a nice storybook ending. Imagine if he wins, man, like going out as the champion in Russia. What a freaking moment that would be. That would be some all-time MMA history stuff. So I think if you're going to give him, you know, that platform, Scott Coker, his exact quote was he wants to give Fedor a king's send-off. Well, if you're trying to do that, why not give him the chance to be the king of your heavyweight division by winning that belt? So yeah, make this happen. Obviously, you know, Ryan Bader could lose and this whole entire thing goes away. But if he doesn't and he wins this fight, I'd love to see it. Zero upside for Ryan Bader, but that's not what we're talking about here. So whatever.
Sorry, Mike, you took too long talking about it. We can't use your idea now. That's just over the clock. But no, listen, it would be a great way to send Fedor out. I guess the one thing I saw as a drawback was you kind of minimize your title at that point if he retires with it. But I guess the great thing about Bellator is then you can just put together a Grand Prix, and now you got a tournament to crown a new winner instead of just picking two random fighters. So I guess they've kind of got a built-in insurance plan there. So, all right, I'm with you. Do it. Even if you went over, you do it. Do it. All right, guys. Lastly, guys, we didn't have any major MMA this past week, but we did see no less than 12 UFC fighters in action at FURY Professional Grappling 3. And I can tell you firsthand, it was a lot of fun, and people got to put some paychecks in their pocket. But there was one very, very unfortunate result with Carla Esparza suffering a pretty nasty cut. Obviously, we know she's trying to get ready for a title fight. It's not an ideal ending. But what do we think of this? I mean, does the good outweigh the bad? Do we need more of this? Or does the risk make it a little dangerous to book cards like this? What do we think about this moving forward? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, you kick it off.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly space in the combat sports world for more of this, especially with the UFC being on board. I think that's a big part of it. If they were not on board, if there was some issues where fighters were going to get, not penalized, but not get approved or things get messy there, then I would say that there would be a little less of a likelihood that it's going to continue to happen. But the UFC being on board, I think that this is a space that maybe we didn't even know needed to be filled. It's a similar recipe to what we've seen in a lot of different things where, they're bringing in names and perhaps maybe, some of the UFC guys that partook in that might not be, the best grapplers or some of these other high level Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners that maybe MMA fans aren't familiar with. But with that being said, I think it draws eyes to the sport. Obviously, them trending in the top 10 in the United States, pretty solid. I don't think I've seen a grappling event do that before. So it's using that same recipe like Bellator used back in the day where they would have, the older fighters come in and kind of integrated new fans into the product of Bellator. We've seen it obviously with Jake Paul in boxing. Like you have a whole another audience pool. So bringing the MMA fans, giving them a reason to watch this grappling, I think that it's phenomenal. And hopefully, hopefully we see more of it because I really dug that event.
Yeah, man, it was a lot of fun. I mean, having guys like Guida in there, Cowboy Cerrone, I mean, legends of the sport. But then a guy like Kevin Holland, he's in there putting on a show. It was a lot of fun, but I'll be honest, I held my breath a little bit when Carla Esparza suffered that cut because we know what she's got coming up in the UFC. So, Mike, what do you think? Is the risk not worth it, or is it enough fun that, hey, we just roll the dice and see what happens?
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, I was the one who was on the coverage for MMA Junkie the night that event was going on, and I thoroughly enjoyed, watching that, writing the stories. It was something different and kind of a little unique that, you don't obviously get to experience very often. It gives the UFC fighters and MMA fighters, of course, we had Steve Mowry from Bellator in there too, gives them some reps, allows them to, show a little bit more of their personality than they do in the UFC. Kevin Holland's got the OnlyFans sponsor. Clay Guida's wearing the singlet. Like, there's some fun stuff going on there. Of course, the Carla Esparza thing, that was unfortunate, but God, I see people in the comments being like, she lost her title shot. Like, oh my God, like this fight isn't even booked yet. It's not like it's happening next week or next month. If it was, I don't think she probably would have got approval to participate in this. So you just kind of need to know when the timing makes sense. I mean, I imagine Carla and Rose aren't going to fight till, March at the earliest, April. That cut's going to be fine by then. So I'm not freaking out. I like the protective rules in terms of, no heel hooks, things like that. So I think all the right steps were taken here. It gives shine to the grapplers that a lot of people don't know. I can't really think of too many negatives to this. I mean, obviously, something crazy could happen in terms of a more serious injury, but I didn't really see anything negative about it besides people having fun out there. So, yeah, I'm all for it. I'd love to see more. Can't wait to see what other kind of names they pluck and pick from the corners of the MMA world.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Carla herself didn't seem too freaked out by it. Obviously, it was unfortunate. But, I mean, cuts can happen in practice, right? I mean, at least she got a nice paycheck for it. So, Goes, what do you think? Are we all on board with this moving forward?
It's a tough one because it's so damn entertaining, but it can be dangerous at times. I mean, I get it. People have been hurt. Look at Cub Swanson, right? A year of his career left because he had to nurse an injury that he got at Quintet. But injuries are part of the game. And make no mistake, if you go to a pro practice at whatever gym you want, their grappling day is going to look just as intense. They do this at least once or twice a week. So I think it really just comes down to the position of the fighter, where they're at in their career. I guess if I'm a manager and my fighter's in the top 10, I probably tell them, unless you really need the paycheck, you need to stay out of this. You need to focus on mixed martial arts. That's your bread and butter. We can't pretend like it's not dangerous. I mean, look, the most physical sport outside of combat sports is probably pro football. And there's a reason why they do the Pro Bowl at the end of the year and not in the middle of the season, right? So it just comes down to the fighter to make that decision.
Yeah, listen, I think it was a lot of fun. I hope we continue to see more of that, and the UFC is on board with allowing their fighters to do it because I don't know, it was a heck of a lot of fun, and it was an unfortunate ending, but as you said, it's not major. It's not going to change the schedule too much. Carla's going to be fine by the time she fights for a title, so hopefully, we avoid issues like that moving forward, but hope we see more of it. I had a blast. Listen, another kind of a slow week to start the year, but enjoy it because it will not be slow after that. I'm already looking at the rest of January. It's loaded up, so things will still happen. Whatever it is, we'll talk about it next week on Spinning Back Clique.